Welcome to my Zone 3 Minnesota garden in August. This is a really exciting month because this is our main production month here in Minnesota. So I'm packing all of my harvest away, doing a lot of food preservation so that we have fresh, delicious, wholesome food to enjoy all winter long. If you're new to my channel, this is a special garden for me because this is the first year that I've been growing food in this location. I've been gardening for 15 years, but we just moved to this beautiful 240 acre homestead and we just broke new ground a few months ago. I didn't know what to expect in this new space with different type of soil, but so far so good. And let's go ahead and do the tour and I'll show you what I have going on. So let's go ahead and start on the right here with all of my different types of peppers. I have hot peppers, sweet peppers, all sorts through here. I had a lot of big aspirations to making hot sauce this year. So here's some of my pepper plants. You can see I have plenty of blooms, but we're not quite producing a ton of fruit. So I don't know if I have a pollination issue or if there's something else going on. Now this one does have a few peppers on it at least, but yeah, there's definitely room for improvement. I am wondering if part of the issue are the tomatoes here. So they are pretty tall and it casts that afternoon shade, and I know that peppers do like the heat in the sun. So I'm gonna try giving these guys a more sunny spot next year and see if that makes a difference. Next, let's move on to the cucumbers. I just like to use some basic fencing with some T-posts. That's been working great for this to trellis on up. And so far, I haven't noticed any cucumber beetles, so I've been very thankful about that. I love to grow pickling cucumbers. I've since given up on the slicing cucumbers because the pickling cucumbers you can use for making pickles, where the slicers are mostly just good for fresh eating. And guess what's also good for fresh eating? These pickling cucumbers. So you really can't go wrong with these. So I just exclusively grow them at this point. And then up above is where I put my owl. Sometimes I'll notice some crow damage on my corn, but since adding a little owl to the garden space, it seems to frighten the crows away. So highly recommend one of those. And then down here in this little open space, I have some rutabagas started. These guys I thought would thrive with a little bit of shade, but they don't seem to be growing very fast. So it might just be a little bit too much shade, but we'll see. We still have at least another month to go, and these guys will tolerate frost pretty well, so they might surprise me. Next up are my pride and joy. I have almost 2 full rows of tomatoes, and these are so special to me because in our previous homestead, I had the hardest time growing tomatoes due to blight issues. It was just way saturated in my soil, where now with this new soil and location, I haven't hardly noticed any issues at all. I've been so thankful, and I'm really looking forward to a wonderful harvest and being able to can all of the tomato things. I have a few cherry tomato plants, but largely what I'm growing are those romas. Now the romas are the really good ones for processing. So if you're wanting to make pasta sauce, salsa, tomato sauce, that's really what we're looking for. A lot of them are ripening well, and I'm so busy right now, I'm just throwing them all in the freezer to process later, but I still have quite a few green ones. So I'm going to be topping the growing tips of my tomato plant soon. So that'll help force the plant to work on what it's got. So I'm hoping that'll help the rest of these ripen in the next month before it freezes. And then let's keep going down the road. These are all our Roma tomatoes. And then you're gonna start noticing more and more flowers throughout my garden. I love to do companion planting with marigolds and calendula. They're just really great at bringing in pollinators and of course those beneficial insects that'll help keep the pests down. Plus, who doesn't like some flowers in their garden? Then as we come around here, we have a few of my eggplants. We're getting a few here and there, but the eggplants don't quite seem to be producing as well as the tomatoes. So you'll notice I have all my nightshades together. We have the eggplant, the tomatoes, and the peppers over here. Again, we have lots of flowers, so hopefully the fruit is not too far behind. And then behind the eggplant is just more and more tomatoes. Let's go ahead and move over here. So my zucchini plant is really starting to get big. I'm really happy that I'm not seeing any signs of powdery mildew. So you'll notice kind of a white fuzzy appearance on the tops of the leaves if it's starting to develop that. And so far so good. The other thing that I'm really happy about is I haven't noticed any evidence of the squash vine borer. So everything looks pretty healthy so far. It looks like I have a few zucchinis in here that I need to get in and harvest, but so far very happy with how the zucchini's going. Here's another patch of my companion planting flowers. So these are calendula. They're starting to get the end of their lifespan here, mostly because I've not been very good about getting in and deadheading these. So you want to remove the spent blooms so it'll continue to put out a flush of new growth. But right around this time is when we actually want to start leaving some of these seed heads, because I'm going to be collecting these to use for seeds next spring. Then over here is a patch. This all used to be broccoli plants. I was originally leaving them all because typically after I harvest the initial broccoli head, I will get some side shoots. So I'll keep producing little stems of broccoli that I can harvest. But this has been a unique year. I haven't really noticed much, except for I do see one little one starting there, but that's about it. Still waiting on those side shoots. So it might be some transplant shock, could be, because these actually were planted in my original garden at our first homestead because we weren't sure that we were actually moving or not. And so I went for it and planted my garden, and then we got this homestead, and so I had to dig up the plants and then they moved here. So I at least got one big broccoli head from all of them, but still waiting on those side shoots. So I finally had to make the executive decision to free up some of this space from those non-producing broccoli plants. And so I just laid some seed down for hopefully a good fall harvest of some fast producing varieties of turnips, radishes, and baby greens, so that will be lovely. And then over here I have a new broccoli plant. I also have some little kohlrabi off to the side. I also have a little lettuce plant, and then behind it are my Brussels sprouts. This first one was kind of wimpy, but the rest are looking really good. The sprouts on these are already pretty darn massive. They're a lot bigger than they ever were at this point in the season compared to our first homestead. So I think it's really liking this new location. And what I do for my brassicas, which is this whole plant family, you know, cabbages, kale, and everything for maintenance, is anytime I come down and I see some older leaves like this, I go ahead and I just remove it. It's not, you know, benefiting the plant anymore. It's just kind of potentially bringing in disease or pests. And it's just nice to clean it up and create, you know, an open space underneath in case you ever want to throw some seeds down. Now let's move over here. So these are my cabbages. So these are just your traditional cabbages that I'm planning on using for sauerkraut and for some fresh eating. A lot of these heads are looking close, so we're getting some good size there. They're nice and firm. I think we'll be ready to pick these pretty soon. We have another older broccoli plant here. I've already harvested the head. Hopefully we'll get some side shoots out of it. Now, while a couple of these cabbage heads are really looking amazing, it's always interesting to me how some just have trouble getting going. You can see this one is pretty tiny as well. They're all the same seed, started at the same time, treated the same way, yet they all have their little differences. Just like humans, I suppose. And then we have another marigold. That one's looking great there. I'm just really enjoying those in my garden space a lot this year. And then here are some turnips and radishes that I seeded a few weeks ago. So these guys are up and looking really great. So hoping that we can harvest from these in a few weeks. Now you'll notice that there's a little white flecks in here, and that's because I figured out that germination in this heavy clay soil was a whole lot better if I mixed in some seed starting mix. And so my seed starting mix just naturally had some perlite, and yeah, it has worked wonders. I had much better germination with this method. Here we have one random mustard green plant that just up and bolted. Didn't really get much from that one, so I'll need to pull that one out. And then here are a few new broccoli plants as well, so still waiting on some head development there. We still have more radishes throughout here. Another broccoli plant, and then more calendula, and then finally some celery. The celery has been kind of so-so. I haven't harvested much of it. I don't think it tolerated the transplant quite as well, but hey, I'll take it. And before we get too far into the garden tour, I forgot I wanted to mention just how I decided to set up this garden. I wanted to do an in-ground garden because I find that it's very versatile. I'm a big fan of them. Great use of space compared to raised beds. It's much more efficient use of space. Plus, I needed to get this garden in quickly and inexpensively. So what I did is I did my rows 4 feet on center, and each row is about 3 feet wide with a 1 foot walking path. And that's been working really well to do 1 plant per row for my big things like tomatoes, and then you can do 2 plants per row for smaller things like the cabbages over here or broccoli. And then the weeds were out of control because we were so busy moving. So I utilized a lot of organic straws just from a local farm off of Facebook Marketplace. That has really saved the day. And then I did use cardboard, or am using cardboard along all my walking paths. That is also really cutting down on my weeding time. Now the cardboard, you have to be careful about what you're using. You want to make sure that it's just brown cardboard, no shiny pigments or anything like that. You don't want a bunch of plastic tape ending up in your garden. And even still, I just don't quite trust cardboard on my plants, so that's why I like to use the organic straw. But for the walking paths, I'm okay with that, and it's really giving me some extra time to devote to carving out our new homestead instead of weeding out the walking paths. So that's been really, really great. And then we have our row of herbs. So I still have a lot of basil going. It is starting to go to seed. I was trying to stay up on, pruning the basil flowers off, but it's finally getting away from me. So I probably need to do one last big harvest and pull it out. Next we have parsley. I have 3 plants in here, 1, 2, 3, and there is 1 little rosemary off to the side here, but this is a wonderful giant version of parsley. I mean, look at this leaf. We're talking huge, and it's so flavorful. I've definitely been freeze drying a lot of this to enjoy all winter long. Then underneath I have a lot of thyme. I actually have 6 different plants all kind of tucked along the sides of my bigger herbs. There you can see it, and it's really liking its little location here. I've also been harvesting a lot. And then this is lemongrass. I love to use this for cooking, and you just harvest the bulbs down there, and I throw it in a Ziploc bag and just into the freezer. It freezes really, really well. And then next to it is lemon balm. I love to dry this as well as a tea. It's also great just muddled in a glass for a refreshing summer drink. And then we have sage. I'm also preserving a lot of this for winter cooking, especially all those nice savory winter stews and chicken dishes. I can't even wait. There's also a little lettuce plant tucked in there. Why not? We have more calendula and then a whole mountain of kale. We love kale around here. It's also really easy to grow. Highly recommend. I'm doing 2 different varieties here, and I love to just freeze it if I have any extra, which I clearly do, so I need to get on freezing it, but it's looking really, really lovely. Next over here are my onions, and I'm really happy to report, if you saw last month's garden tour, I was feeling nervous about the bulb development, but I think we're doing okay. You can see they're definitely starting to form now. So I'm pretty happy with it. The tops haven't fallen over yet either, so that's a sign that they're done. So they're not done yet. They are still growing. And look at that beautiful pumpkin. Oh, I can't even wait to harvest those. They're not ready yet though. And these are all onions. We're gonna keep going down the row. Onions are really important for us. We eat them all winter long and they store really well. I like to braid them. It's just, there's such a beautiful way to store them hung up in braids. And then here are my shallots. These guys have fallen over because they are ready to go, and they're looking beautiful. Here, let's go ahead and pull one up. Look at how big that is. It's about the size of a normal onion, so I'm super excited with how these have turned out. And within the same family, we have leeks. This is actually my first time growing leeks. These still have a little ways to go as well. They have a very long growing period, so hoping by next month I'll be able to pull them out. Here we have more marigolds again, and then we have a complete jungle of corn and squash, and then some dill. So last month I said it was 3 feet tall. It's definitely 5 feet tall now, and we're getting a lot of beautiful seed heads that I'm definitely using for all the canning and fermenting to get that wonderful pickle flavor. So what I have here are 3 different rows of sweet corn, and last month I was worried about the ear development, but this is also really starting to pick up. You can see that we are looking good. We're not quite ready to harvest yet, but we are very close. You can see that the silks are already starting to brown a little bit. And then my strategy with growing corn is in the middle. I like to plant my winter squash, kind of like the 3 sisters method, if you've heard of that before. So 3 sisters is corn, squash, and green beans. So the green beans will vine up the corn. I prefer bush beans, so I skip out on the pole beans part. But how I do it is for this row here, I have 2 rows of corn. For this row here, I have a gap here. So I have a little bit of corn here, a little bit of corn there, and a big gap, and then a full row of corn. And then the 3rd row over here has 2 more rows of corn. So in this gap here, in this 3rd row of corn, you can see that is where I planted my initial squash plants. And so I'm growing butternut squash. I'm also growing Cinderella pumpkins. They both store really well, so they're a good winter solution for us here in Minnesota. And then I just let the vines run wild. They just absolutely go everywhere, and they tolerate the little bit of shade underneath the corn. And then they provide a living mulch for the corn. So it's kind of a win-win, and it's doing really well. You can see it's starting to spill out into the carrots, which I'll need to tame here because I don't want them taking over my carrots. Otherwise, I think we're looking good. I'm keeping my eye on the center to make sure that we're not having any development of powdery mildew, but I think so far so good. And here we have more calendula with lots of seed heads. I need to get in there and do some more deadheading so it'll keep producing blooms for me. And then here we have all of the carrots. I know last month I was nervous that I wouldn't have much of a carrot harvest. You can see it goes all the way down to the back over there. And the reason why I was nervous is 2 reasons. One, we have pretty compacted, heavy clay soil, and at our previous place we had nice loose sandy soil, which carrots love. So I was a little worried about this compacted soil. And then the other thing is they kind of got overrun with weeds a couple times while we were busy moving, so they looked pretty sad last month, but now they're really starting to take off, and you can see in here they're developing pretty good. So I'm hoping within a few weeks we'll be able to harvest those. Next are my green beans. So these are all bush beans. This is an important staple for us in the winter time here in Minnesota. Green beans freeze really, really well. I've also been doing some freeze drying of the green beans, so that's a fun new thing for me. I'm also canning dilly beans, so I'm preserving it 3 different ways. And the thing with bush beans is they are a short producer, so they are not like your pole beans where they'll produce all season long. So I do it in 2 different batches. On the back half, I planted those right away, and they're actually just finishing out, so they're almost done producing. And then this front half is almost getting ready to produce, so they are just getting started. You can see we have some baby beans here. Probably within a couple days we'll be ready to switch over to this one. And then lastly, we just have some random bits of kale. Why not? Let's do a little bit more. And then back here are all my potatoes. I am a little worried about these because again, it's heavy clay compacted soil. I didn't have all that much time to really prep and loosen the soil like I wanted to. So I'll be curious to see what the tubers look like under there. I'm gonna guess that's probably not gonna be my best harvest just because the foliage itself is pretty puny. It's not quite as productive as I'm used to, but you never know. It might surprise me. And the foliage is starting to look a little brown and kind of dead-like, and that's actually normal. So we're gonna wait until the tops have completely died back, and then it's gonna be time to harvest. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about my fencing. I always get lots of questions about it. So this is electric poultry netting, and I've been using this exclusively to protect my garden for at least 8 or 9 years now, and it's done great. Deer don't get through it, raccoons, all of the things. And I love it because A, it's a whole lot cheaper than permanent fencing, and B, you can move it. I don't know if you're like me, but I'm always expanding my garden, so I would be so sad if I had permanent fencing and then I wanted to make it bigger and I was stuck. So this is great. You just take it down in the fall and then set it back up in the spring in any shape that you'd like. And you can see this section is doubled up because I still have a little bit of room to do a full perimeter. So how we did it is you just have your posts come together and then just run the extra back. You could run it along half the length of the fence if you wanted to, if you don't have as big of a garden as I do. And then this is how we create the gate. So we just have the two ends that come together and fitted like that, and you can just flip it open. It's really easy. And how you can power this fence, we want that electric shock, otherwise yes, the critters will come through it. You can run it by solar or by plug-in, and I actually have this one run via a plug-in because we actually have power right in this little garden shed here, where the electric poultry netting that I'm using over here for my poultry. So this is our temporary makeshift set up for our chickens right now while we're still getting all settled in. They'll definitely have a more substantial coop for winter, but they are being run by solar. So I have this little unit set up here. So it works so well. We have tons of predators out here. I was a little nervous for these guys, and so far I haven't lost a single one. This netting is amazing. Highly recommend. I'll link it in the show notes if you're interested in checking it out. But yeah, that's all I've ever used for garden fencing, and all I probably will continue to use. Well, that was so fun. I loved having you guys here in my garden to do the grand tour. If you'd like me to do one in September, let me know in the comments. That could be fun as well, especially as we're dipping into those freezing temperatures. If you'd like to see more gardening, self-sufficiency, and homesteading content from me, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and then check out the show notes. I have a bunch of great information there to help you out on your journey as well. See you next time.